I'm in Shanghai this week working with a client on their anti-bribery management system. And so I thought I'd take a moment to share some thoughts with you on a question I frequently get asked about regarding business in Asia, where gift giving and hospitality is such an important part of doing business. And that question is, when does one person's gifts or hospitality become another person's bribe? International businesses in Asia, especially those in China, can face daily pressures in complying with both anti-corruption laws and local practices concerning gift giving and hospitality. Gift giving, which is ubiquitous in China, has been under fire of late by both laws outside and from within China. For example, the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the FCPA, forbids gift giving to foreign officials in order to procure business. This can make international business transactions in China particularly challenging because, one, there are so many state-owned enterprises in China, and therefore many people can be considered as public officials. And two, because as we've seen in other cases, a gift of any value can trigger an FCPA violation. Within China, anti-corruption measures have also increased dramatically in recent years, where the government has aggressively pursued high-profile prosecutions in order to win the trust of a population that has frankly grown weary of official corruption. China's criminal code clearly prohibits bribery, and even accepting a bribe by a state official is also a crime and a serious infraction and may lead to life imprisonment or even, in some cases, the death penalty. Despite these regulations, China is still considered a high-risk business environment, and multinational corporations are advised to have a robust compliance program in place to monitor illegal payments and gifts. So, what's a foreign company operating in China to do? How can it ensure a balance between cultural norms on one side and ensuring that it stays on the right side of bribery laws? Transparency International has set up some very useful tests to help businesses decide if gifts, hospitalities, or other expenses are appropriate. These tests are helpful and can be applied to a range of circumstances and occasions to help ensure the robustness of a company's gift and hospitality policies, and to safeguard the company and its employees against charges of bribery. To check yourself, you may want to run the following test. The bona fide test. Is the gift being made for the right reason? If it is a gift or expression of hospitality, it should be clearly given as an act of appreciation and for nothing else. If travel expenses are covered, it should be for a bona fide business purpose and not as a reward. The no obligation test. Does the gift create any obligations or expectations on the part of the recipient? The undue influence test. Could the expenditure be seen as being intended for or capable of achieving undue influence in relation to a business transaction or a public policy engagement? The openness test. Will the gift giving be performed in private and be undocumented? If it is, then its purpose becomes questionable. Legality. Is the gift compliant with the local laws? As we've seen in the case of China, new laws have been placed on the books that prohibit the giving of luxury goods and even traditional mooncakes. The US FCPA is no longer the only game in town. Get to know the local laws and what's acceptable. The reasonable bystander test. What would a reasonable bystander think if the gift giving wouldn't be viewed favorably by most stakeholders as being reasonable? It probably isn't and should be avoided. The proportionality test. Is the value and nature of the expenditure disproportionate to the occasion? For example, if you're thanking a client for speaking at an industry event with a gift, the gift shouldn't be a car or an all-expenses-paid trip to Hawaii. The reciprocity test. Does the gift conform to the recipient's organization's policy? To avoid misperceptions as well as embarrassment, you should check to ensure that the gift conforms to the recipient's rules on gifts and hospitality. Many organizations now have specific rules around acceptable gifts as part of their codes of conduct, which are often available online. Check to see that your gift meets the rules or codes of the recipient's organization. The infrequency test. Is the gift giving a frequent occurrence? Even insignificant gifts can add up over time. Be sure that the giving or receiving of gifts or hospitality is not an overly frequent occurrence between the giver and the recipient. The documentation test. Are the expenses related to gifts and hospitalities fully documented, including noting its purpose, who approved the expense, and the value? And finally, the review test. Are the records of promotional expenses and the effectiveness of the policy periodically reviewed by management, with a regular report being sent to the board or a board committee to ensure that it has a proper oversight? Organizations doing business in China, or really anywhere internationally, would be well advised to embed these tests into its gifts and hospitality policies and ensure that these policies are reinforced through appropriate training and communication practices, helping to ensure that the organization has adequate procedures in place to prevent bribery by its employees and by those acting on behalf of the organization internationally. Stay safe out there.